Thank you for tuning in to the Edelex podcast. We are an edtech whose mission is to surface learning outcomes, digital assets, and the power of individual achievement. Each episode features thought-provoking conversations with global technology leaders and educators, where we discuss how we can deliver better outcomes for 21st century learners.
Hi, I'm Dan McFadden, co-founder and managing director at Edelex, and it's my great pleasure to be joined today by Bill Hughes. Bill is the president and CEO of Education Design Lab, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. The lab engages learning institutions, employers, and regions using design thinking to unlock economic opportunity via skills-based pathways into and through quality jobs and careers. Before joining the lab, he was the founder and CEO of JobReady, which was acquired by LearningMate. Previously, he was Chief Strategy Officer at Learning Objects, which was acquired by Cengage, and led business development at Pearson. He co-founded Intellis Learning, acquired by Macmillan, and oversaw the transformation of Pearson's learning products into its flagship MyLab platform. Over the past 25 years, he has held leadership positions at Sapient, Mercer, and the Cambridge Innovation Center. In addition, he was a member of the board of trustees of Kaplan University that became Purdue University Global. Hughes currently serves as a board member of Berkshire Bank and Education Development Center. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a great pleasure.
Dan, it's great. Thank you so much, too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And we first connected back in a previous life for both of us at Pearson. But I don't want to talk about ancient history today. I'd love to really dive into the amazing work you're doing and Education Design Lab is doing. And my personal contact and first connection with the lab was in meeting Don Fraser, who's now UDL's Senior Vice President of Design and Innovation, at a conference. And you're in the process of rolling out your 21st century micro-credentials. And that was 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe longer. And I think suffice to say, the lab today is a very different organization, and we've really gone from strength to strength since then. So can you tell us more about the lab and what its mission is?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dan. And Don is I think he's the longest tenured person on staff right now, and has been responsible for so many innovations that we've done and sort of how they've evolved. Starting with way back in 2014, there was a design session, kind of applying design thinking at the White House, and an interesting session, sort of, asking this design question: how might government best accelerate scalable pathways into high quality and low cost workforce-ready credentials? And that led to a whole host of these design sessions Don was involved in, as well as our founder, Kathleen Dulowski, who's now our board chair. And it's been applying this kind of, design thinking approach through the years. In 2015, they started bringing together higher ed leaders and looking at how do you apply design thinking approaches to really wicked problems in higher ed. In 2016, there was a 10-person college design sprint. I think it was funded by Lumina, looking at the traditional models for higher ed. And that was a harbinger of something that was to come, that's really our flagship now, which is the Community College Growth Engine. We kept going, through the years, engaged leaders at UNCF, around their schools, and then kind of taken a slight shift really in towards the learner with this parent learners. It was called Single Moms at the time, design challenge, because if you look at the number of single parents who don't successfully graduate in a community college model, it's pretty dramatic. And they're talented, they're smart, but the system is not designed for them to be successful through the college program. So we sort of help these colleges rethink their programs and the supports around them, but putting that learner, in this case, the single moms, at the center. And that work is still going on right now. We got it refunded, regranted rather, to take it to the next level. The other thing that happened right around that time, I think that was 2019, was we published this thought leadership piece called The Learner Revolution, really trying to look at how colleges can thrive in this new world of skills. So part of it was just a recognition of this shift to skills, to competencies, beyond just degrees as kind of brands that should speak for what people can do. There was also this rise of what we call the weave, of weaving in life, learning, earning, and living. People, once you're an adult, before you're out of high school in the U.S. system, anyway, you've got the system and the state and society is all kind of organized around you going through this one path. And the assumption is you're going to, in modern U.S., is to get out of high school, go to college. And that's the normal path. Only 20% of people, fewer than that actually, in some indications, actually go from high school right through and graduate from college. And the other 80%.
Just to interrupt there, Bill. So you said fewer than 20% follow that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The numbers slosh around at times, but there was one study I had seen was 18% a few years ago, which is crazy, right?
And
that was not even just.
Sorry, there's such that expectation that is the traditional route.
That's the model, right? Exactly. And and if you talk to anybody on the street, I go to conferences all the time. Everyone's thinking about what they want aspirationally for their kids, which is you go to high school, you go to college, get a good job. Your aspiration isn't, discover who and what you are for 10 years, because by then the mindset, and again, this might be an American mindset. I've not grown up in another country, but is that somehow you're going to be behind. So that's, maybe then 80% of our talent force is behind, according to those metrics. So it sort of begs the question of, first of all, why is this happening? So what are the barriers? So we look into those types of things, and what can be done about it. And one of the pieces is that when you look at the traditional college degree, it's not broken. It's just incomplete. Like it was not designed for 100% of the population to be trained in post-secondary. It was designed for maybe 5 or 10%. And the fact that we got to 20%, maybe people think are a success. And then even, if you have adult learners who somehow fall out of the system but make their way back, there's another 15%. So ultimately, 35% people do get a college degree, bachelor's degree, at least in the US, but 65% still don't. And, they're, which means that they often don't have the credential of value that they need to be successful. So there's two problems there. One is what types of credentials are available? And we do some work on that. And then what are the credentials that are valued in the talent sector? So we try to help move both of those things along by the work that we do. And we think of the community college in the US as the best connected organization, institution, because they're connected with the workforce sector, they're connected with talent, they're connected with employers. They understand short-term programs. They understand adult education, and they understand open enrollment and open access and affordability. So all of these things kind of come together, and they're funded. Most of them are funded by public funding, at least in part, if not substantially. So they're they've got great positionality, but they're not equipped to transform themselves. And what organizations really are designed to do that, but especially not them. They're barely able to often deliver on the promises that they have to the public. And so the idea of transforming themselves is kind of crazy. So that's where we've kind of come in and continue to do these design challenges funded by philanthropy and increasingly funded by other sources as well to help these kind of transformations.
That's fantastic, Bill, and so important that you are tackling the challenges and the opportunities from a number of different fronts. And we had the pleasure of working with the labs team on the XCredit project, which targets individuals known as stars, those who are skilled through alternate routes. So I think that plays, builds on some of what you've been talking about so far. But yeah, can you tell us more about these stars and why is that project so important?
Yeah, so stars again. People skilled through alternative routes. That was a term popularized by another nonprofit in the U.S. Called Opportunity at Work, and we're a partner of theirs. The name we came up with, which I think is complementary to that, and it's really talking about the same type of folks, is new majority learner, and the majority is represents the majority of people who don't have these kind of degrees, and the fact that they're learners, they're not learning all the time, but it's the fact that the learning experience has been kind of broken for them. But and those are the folks who need to be skilled through alternative routes. So as opposed to a four-year college degree, it's and even beyond a shorter version of a four-year degree, which is a two-year associate's degree. There's there's this notion that there needs to be some sort of alternative credential that accelerates you. It's directly aligned to jobs and career, accelerates you into those jobs, and that they can also be stacked so that you get that one credential and you're not left off, but those can be stacked one to another. So now in that context, what we discovered is there's, people will show up, and I'll give you an example of people will show up that have skills, but they don't have the credential.
Yep.
And so then what do you do with those folks? There's one guy who came out of the military. He had run over 100 projects.
Clearly skilled. Yeah.
Clearly skilled, but he didn't know he was a project manager.
Yeah.
Right? Because in this, he thought he had military experience. It was called one thing. He didn't know how to translate that into civilian experience. Now, somebody's really savvy and really understands both worlds can maybe tell that story and bridge it from one to another. But it's relying a lot on your own kind of cunning and your communication savvy. So what XCredit is and what problem it solves is how do you actually give credit for experience? XCredit. And what kind of things qualify as credit, as experience? Well, clearly, if you've gone through some academic work, maybe like you have transcript, maybe that should articulate into credit. That's obvious. Or maybe you're taking a non-credit course, but it's demonstrated your ability to do something that's valuable in the workforce. And you see like Google certifications and cybersecurity certifications and project management certifications, all these different types of things, much less the other things that are in the skill trades. All of those things are skills. There's someone I know who's started a really interesting program for spouses of military folks, many of whom are very skilled themselves.
Sure.
And has created essentially a part-time worker program for these folks who are off on bases around the world, and they don't get opportunities to work, or nor do they get credit for the work that they do. So this program actually creates both the opportunity to work and a credential that sort of says, this attests to what you can do. So what the other thing that XCredit does is it actually allows for those things to be all integrated. If you're in a military and you have military service, how does that automatically translate into some sort of credit and recognition of skills attained? So, and all of those things then need to feed into like a skills wallet, which is kind of a new concept. And you guys are familiar with that at
Right.
LX. But that, and that skills wallet can actually start to tell a different story and help someone tell a different story about what they can do, how they can do it, and provide evidence to that effect. So that's kind of what we're doing with XCredit. And the reason why it's important to people skilled through alternative routes is that, well, you don't have anything, otherwise, what do you have? Maybe you have your own resume, and who's validated that, right? And who's attested to that. So there's an opportunity for much more powerful instrument for validation of skills through something like an XCredit model.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And again, building on the stat that you shared of under 20% are following that traditional route. And I love the expression new majority learner. So that is something that I think resonates at all levels. I love sharing an example that one of a high school that we work with here in Australia shared that one of her high school students said that she didn't have any skills. She just worked at McDonald's. And when you think about it, like, what? That's incredible, right? So you have teamwork, you have conflict resolution, you have collaboration, you have task focus. There's so many of these skills. And I think, through the 21st century skills that the lab developed now quite a few years back, is really focusing on those durable skills that are so important for all of us, and ultimately being able to recognize both the potentially domain specific or technical skills, as well as these durable skills that will support someone. And I love that example that you shared of someone coming out of the military and not being able to, not having the language or evidence to back up those skills that they do have. So
yeah, and I think to that, just to finish that point off, you mentioned durable skills, and we built actually a whole competency framework that gives names to these durable skills. So teamwork, critical thinking, collaboration, and so forth, that they were designed by, with, and for employers as to the things that they understand that are the complementary skills to those technical skills that folks are learning. And the other thing is, how do you then measure those things? So it's one that you can name them, and those are really important. You can give attestation that I see evidence of something, but then is there a way also to evidence them through some sort of like mastery challenges and simulations and so forth. So and I think we actually got some funding to do that through the gracious support of Walmart Foundation. Actually build out several dozen of these mastery challenges that are all scenario based, and therefore they do a better, authentic job of assessing what someone's skills and abilities are, and what they're what they can show. And I think this is only going to increase with the advent of generative AI and be able to create at scale very tailored types of assessments and challenges and situations for people to respond to, and even respond to and have their feedback captured in an automated way. Like, you might in another world, not that you would ever be able to be replaced by a person, much less a bot. But I can imagine, you feeding your script of things that this is what I care about for Bill. Can you bot interview Bill right now? Right? If we had something like Otter turned on, it would be capturing everything I said, summarizing it, being able to look for trends that you care about, and then feeding back to you the same type of feedback that you get if you talk to somebody in your company who's an interviewer,
Right.
and you don't have the problem of, okay, this person just got off the phone with their partner and they're upset when they're talking to you, or they forgot to go to the bathroom and they can't focus on what you're saying, or they're bleary-eyed and they have a meeting coming up, and so so I think there's even an opportunity for more greater and richer types of kind of non-academic, really, feedback about what people can do. And that's really what we care about. We don't care that they sat through a course. We care about what they could do. If sitting through a course helps you build strength and muscle and skill and patience and experience in doing that, that's great. But that's certainly not the only way. And sometimes it's not the best way.
Yeah. No. Well said. Well said. And building on a number of themes that you've shared already, Bill. I was just reminded that that we've been pleased to be a member of your skills validation network that is bringing together a number of players in the space and really looking and trying to tackle that wicked challenges around how do you recognize skills in a meaningful way and share that. And one of the mechanisms, as a design lab, and it was great the number of design thinking examples that you gave in terms of the lab's history. So I know the lab gets involved in a number of different initiatives around standards for the exchange of information and in terms of promoting skills visibility. And one of the many admirable things about the lab is that you are often leading the way and pushing and challenging assumptions and models. So are there particular standards that you try to weave in, or do you feel those standards are helping?
So you're in terms of talking about specifics, because I'm someone who loves standards and appreciates them, and I've used them in other contexts. And I want to be respectful of the work that's being done in standards, but I think they're emergent in this space, and to the degree that they're more than that, I wouldn't do justice to like which one or ones or follow this one or that one, because I know when I was doing that in other spaces, it mattered a lot which what the name of it was. But I will say that the work of around digital wallets is a big deal. I think for a few different reasons. One is if we're gathering all these skills, there needs to be a place for them, and there needs to be some sort of portability for the user and ability to essentially express those in ways that are meaningful to them. In the same way, you might tailor a resume, or you tailor a cover letter to tell a story about yourself. Well, how do you actually, with a different kind of artifact, not only have all that stuff validated in a one place, but also tell a story about yourself? Another thing is, in the US, there's a lot of aversion to kind of a national identity record.
Right.
It's kind of weird. I think there's some, I won't go into like why I think these things exist, but they do. And it's made it hard to have kind of a national record of like who you are and what you can do. But it's starting to happen, like if not at the federal level, at the state level, where states are putting out wallets for things like, when COVID was here, your COVID record, and for and other immunizations, and your driver's license. So My Colorado is where my daughter went to school at one point in Colorado, and the My Colorado wallet was a digital wallet that you could download to her phone, and it had a whole bunch of stuff about her. And the skills work is a little bit behind. It's not the easiest thing to put into wallets and to use, but that's coming. And I won't say there's one standard. There's a bunch of different standards. I guess there's the open badging is probably the one that's closest that I know a little bit about. And when I was at Pearson, we had the Acclaim system which then got acquired by Credly and then got reacquired back by Pearson. And
Right.
I know they're on a journey around those standards, and I think they're seeking greater. As a private company, you have to wrestle with issues of your strategy and interoperability and all that stuff. But I think they're moving in that domain. Other folks like Badger
Hmm.
are already living in the space of kind of the open badges, so that one badge system and another badge system can interoperate and share your information. And I think all of that is really in support of empowering the learner, so that it's not about an entity, a corporation or institution owning your information, but it's about you owning your information and then making sense of where it makes the most sense for you. So we think those things are important. But I want to take a step back, and just talk about the concept of standards in general and why they're important in this ecosystem. It's a pretty messy ecosystem. The U.S. in particular, again, you got 50 states plus federal plus other jurisdictions, and then you have so each one of those is sort of its own market.
Mhm.
Um, and in each one of those own markets, there's different policies that drive how funding works, drives how what kind of programs are supported. And in some of those states, you have a lot of metropolitan areas. So there's a certain type of work that shows up in those kind of areas. In other states, it's like Australia. It's like, there's a wide open mass, like there's no people. There are probably more prairie dogs than there are people, or kangaroos, whatever,
Right.
joeys. Um, that the US version of that.
Mhm.
So how do you scale something in a rural community?
Yeah.
And what do those programs look like? So there's a lot of kind of variability, and without some common standards, it's very hard to coalesce momentum in the sector to really move innovation at the speed and scales that it needs to. Uh, so we are focused on a few different things around standards. One of them is, and these are, I would say, our um, contributions to having standard vocabulary and standard concepts. I don't want to push it as like this is the EDL standard, because
Okay.
I think
Sure.
we're trying to be more inclusive and including ourselves and what other work is going on as well. But we are doing work, in our micro pathways. We have over 100 community colleges. There are fewer than 1,000 in the U.S. and have 100 that we're actively working with right now. There's another 100 in the pipeline who want to work with us. So that sort of creates a standards-like dynamic of a number of different institutions all doing the same or similar things. And in that work, we not only do work with those schools to build these micro pathways, which are essentially a blueprint for stackable credential programs that can be for credit or non-credit, that people can weave in and out of, which is to say start and stop. They get something in a year or less. It articulates to a job that's in demand in their
Hmm.
area, all those types of things. So there's that blueprint, and they're called lots of different things around the country, but they all sort of have this common piece. And we have communities of practice that we build in support of that, so that there are birds of a feather who are all kind of coming together and supporting one another as they innovate in this space. The other main place where we're doing this, is in two other places. One is in skills visibility, which is what we call kind of the wallet space. So we talked
Okay.
about wallets. And then the third one is, you mentioned this sort of Center for Skills Validation that Edelex is part of, that um, we've got a notion that if we're going to have skills-based credentials, one of the challenges right now is there are actually like 1 million micro credentials. I think they're in this system called Credential Engine, which is another system that has some sort of standardization around a credential registry. We support that, so that's another one maybe to put on the list. But with those 1 million credentials, that's way too many for any employer to really understand, like which one and which ones are good and how do I make sense of all that. So there needs to be some sort of quality criteria that comes, on top of that. There's some quality initiatives like the Equos initiative that JFF has been pushing forward, but there's also this need, I think, that's for sort of ex post quality, like what programs have shown that they have success, that they have successful outcomes. But I think there's another way of defining quality, which is also matters, which is design quality. Like, is something designed right? Right. And if it's designed right and has the right design characteristics, then it intrinsically has quality. And I think that's an important thing to do for people who are designing new things, because the feedback loop is too late if you wait to see outcomes to know whether you did it right. So we believe one of the key pieces of quality for skills-based credentials is a coherent, consistent, understood way of measuring skills. And we call those skill validators. And they can show up in lots of different ways. They could be an assessment or a mastery challenge or simulation that someone goes through. It can be an attestation at the end of an internship or an apprenticeship that someone says, I attest that these things have happened. But in all these different cases, there needs to be some common sensibility about what these things are, what they're attesting to, what they're referencing. If they're drawing from skills taxonomies, to have clear kind of referenceability to those. If they're generating new kinds of skills, there's probably something around there. And also the functionality of it to be able to help a learner, earner tell their story. So all of those things that, they plug into wallets. So we don't know what the end game is with what skill validators are, but we've sort of flown that flag. And as we've started flying it, before we've even finished defining it, people are coming to us. We have dozens of organizations coming to us and saying, we think we're building skill validators and we'd like to talk with you about it and try to figure out what you guys have learned. So we've got a whole research program that's advancing the state of the art around that. And we also have this Center for Skills Validation Network that you guys are a part of, that is moving this kind of work forward. So we think, probably in the next year or so, I would suspect it's going to have enough traction where we could start saying some things definitively about what skill validation is. And we already have some papers around that. So in some ways we've already said it, but I mean, I'm up with that we really want to start, shouting it from the rooftops.
That's brilliant, Bill. And one of the things that we love talking about is the concept of giving learner earners a voice for their skills. And we commissioned some market research a few years back that identified that of more than 1,000 American college graduates, only a third felt comfortable voicing their own skills during their first job search. But it's not just at that learner earner perspective, but also from an institutional perspective, as the work you've just described. It's so important to ensure that the educational institutions and other organizations are thinking about it with the end in mind, and what skills, what capabilities, what competencies are they helping develop in those learners. Shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to talk about the grant that you received from Mackenzie Scott and her Yield Giving Foundation, and which is just amazing. And I understand typically it's not something you apply for, but they look at they do background research on and not for profits that are doing amazing work, and then suddenly you receive this grant. So congratulations on that. That's amazing. So what does that mean for the lab, and what do you do with something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we first of all, we're so grateful to McKinsey Scott and the Yield Giving Foundation that we announced it publicly, so I'll say we received $6 million of unrestricted funding, which was the largest unrestricted single grant that we've ever received. And it very quickly accelerated, so for me as CEO, we've got some financial goals, and one of our goals is over time, you build up your reserve of unrestricted funds, which gives you some more cushion to do a few different things, which I'll mention. So first of all, it accelerated that a lot. So it gives us some breathing room and opportunity to kind of explore and take risks at a in a way that we otherwise we might have like waited longer to find external funding. And when I say wait, I mean work and beat the pavement and try to find external funding for something that we know is the right thing to do. And I'll give you one example of that, which is with our growth engine work. That's part of our college transformation capability at the lab. So we've built over 300 micro pathways, with now working with close to 100 colleges at this point. And the first cohorts of colleges, I mean, everybody who's done this work has continued on with it, which has been great.
Right.
And some of them have said, this was so successful within our organization that we want to go deeper. We've been talking about, our strategic plan and what we want our strategic planning process to include. And they've come back and said, we want you guys in that process. So, because they realize now, if you're creating a new category of credential, it's really a new category of market that you're going after. And in some of these places, 50% of the folks that are enrolling with them are coming from some sort of alternative direction than the traditional. So, and when you think about traditional enrollments declining, there's one group we were talking about the other day. Traditional enrollments are declining, but this credential kind of micro pathway style stuff is growing anywhere from 20 to 40% a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So all of a sudden people are like, oh, maybe this is strategic. So what is our plan around it? And what is it that we have to, why do we have to work with the lab in order to even do this? And the answer is that just not organized to to shuffle everything around. And the way that we get folks to shuffle things around is we say, let's find a transcendent purpose, which is the learner, right? What is the learner's journey? How do we empathize with the learner and the learner's need? And then, and that's on one side of the equation. And then the other side of the equation is employers, because if employers are not engaged, then it doesn't really matter. So what do employers need in our region? How do we work more effectively with them? And then it starts to suggest, well, how do you actually staff your organization differently so that you have better connectivity with learners, better connectivity with employers, and where faculty and program designers are working together with new sets of goals beyond the academic goals that really are helping learners. They came to us with all that. We're out there now starting to look for funding to get that going. But there's a half dozen of them who said, we love that and we're ready now.
Yeah.
So, we're able to sort of, begin that process a little sooner than we would have otherwise. and do it in earnest. And, so we're not leaving people out hanging, but, we do need to continue to raise money and support programs like this. But, having the starter dough, the seed to be able to do that, the working capital that we can borrow from, and our goal is really to treat it like a bit of an investment fund, to invest in projects that we think others are going to fund, but we want to basically seed it and then replenish and grow. And that allows us to continue to stay a bit ahead of the curve, continue to take a little bit more risk, so that we don't get sort of slowed down by the vagaries of the funding cycle, things like that.
Which is so important these days. Is with AI, and you flag, no conversation can go by without mentioning AI. It obviously is having a massive impact on the economy, on businesses, on individuals, right? So there's that question of threats to their jobs and opportunities. Yeah,
exactly. And you mentioned our mutual friend Don Frazier before, and Don, about a year ago, a little over maybe a year and a half ago now, came to me and started talking about AI and his interest. And he said, well, why don't we try this or that? We got together as a leadership team and agreed that, we can't go into this year without making a commitment to building our own capabilities in AI. So we were able to, and we did this even before the McKinsey Scott money, but we made an investment in training the entire staff on AI. The McKinsey Scott money made that less of a perilous, heart palpitating thing. So, investing so that now we have projects that we do where, traditional research approaches pale in comparison to ones that can be done, with AI. We're able to do a lot more interviews like this, automatically transcribe, automatically process and analyze, find trends, things like that. We can look at, new concepts like we do a lot of persona work, where the purpose of the persona is to have the intentions and the experience and the situation of end users, of new majority learners, stars, be represented in the design process. And, we see opportunities even for AI to support that. And then, I had mentioned before, there's places where, whether it's improving the learning experience or an assessment experience, or even translation experience for, of skills from, there's a project with a group called Astrum that we pioneered a year ago that about automating the reading of military records, for example, and having those translate directly into wallets. So so that's a big deal, and there's going to be a lot more, be a ton more. And the other thing about AI, so that's all the good, here's what's possible side.
Right. And
then it's sort of like, oh yeah, we invented gunpowder. Hooray. 3 people come back with their hands blown off, right? So it's like, okay, maybe we need to have some rules and some guidelines and some safety around this. And it's a serious issue, because it's not, AI, unlike gunpowder, people are not explosive themselves. They can have explosive personalities, but they themselves don't coexist. But human beings are being imitated and replicated, and aspects of human experience are being imitated and replicated by AI. So, and AI doesn't even, the fuel for AI is us, right? It gets no smarter than what we allow it to get. Right. So if we decide that we want to allow AI to read all of our books, to read all my content, to read my movements around the planet, then it's going to get smarter about all of those things. And I don't own the system that all that stuff goes into. So someone does.
Right.
Some entity does. So we've got to sort of figure out, how all that stuff works. And what does it mean to be a human in this age of AI? You know, we actually, to that end, the other thing that Don did was he started a Humans of AI, um,
Yeah.
which is, you know, there was Humans of New York, published by the New York Times. Well, we have a set of interviews, and we're continuing to do them and push them out on a periodic basis, of just ordinary people in all walks of life, from like students to people working to, you know, we had Paul LeBlanc. We did an interview
Hmm.
with last week. I think we published it. You know, the former kind of legendary president of Southern New Hampshire University.
Yeah.
You know, and other innovators, and you'll see more. I met some folks this past weekend at a reunion event for my school, and they've sort of said they're interested. But you know, it's this aspect of how are you human in the world of AI? What does it mean to kind of find your place there? And you know, in some ways, how can we leverage AI, but how do we protect folks? And we're particularly careful and focused on protecting the interests of the new majority learner. So how do we make sure that that AI and its adoption is safe
Hmm.
uh, for everyone, especially them, because they often, you know, don't have someone at the table advocating for their interests.
Right. Right. Wow. Well, that's such important work, Bill. So thank you for that. I really appreciate your time. We're getting close to our time, but I have one final question for you. Gazing into your crystal ball, and again, coming back to building on all the fantastic work of Education Design Lab and design thinking, and how you're pushing the boundaries. Where do you see the lab in 5 years? Will AI have totally taken over, or no? I'm sure it won't. But yeah, where would you like to see the lab, and what sort of role do you want to be playing in 5 years?
Yeah, so I think that I was talking with somebody today about this, where you know we've talked a lot about community colleges, and one place I want to be is I want to help transform any community college that wants to into, at least as part of what they do, if not a majority of what they do, to be talent partners for industry, which means that they're highly able to highly align to basically work at the speed of business as opposed to work at the speed of accreditation, and that they're able to align their programs and to really understand those needs. Why is that? Well, ultimately our focal point is the new majority learner,
Hmm.
but we can't, and specifically with respect to them, supporting their best economic outcomes and their best career outcomes. Well, we can't do that if industry is not, you know, a part of the equation, because they have,
Yeah.
you know, they're the demand side of the talent equation. But in addition, and we think that having them be good talent partners is going to transform them. I think it'll make them a lot more compelling and relevant in our society. It's a big investment the society makes in the U.S., especially. So we also can only really do that if we are good partners with talent. And that means understanding the new majority learners. So we're bringing that understanding more deeply, and we want to, you know, want to elevate that and make it more explicit in lots of different ways. And um, uh, you know, ranging from, you know, something that smells like, I would say, next generation persona work that's powered by AI,
Hmm.
uh, to uh, clearer kind of learner, you know, the key design requirements to making learning effective and things like AI effective and safe for those folks, and with something that they can lean into as kind of transformative innovation, as opposed to resisting and fighting because it's not working to support them. We want to make sure that that AI, as it evolves in this space, really does support their interests. And then the third, you know, thing is, if we can help colleges if we can be better partners with them, if we can help colleges be better partners with industry, that also ought to enable colleges, frankly, to help industry be better partners with talent. And when you think about we've talked about lifelong learning. That's the other thing I'll just leave with. The new phrase that I'm using is lifelong skilling, just because lifelong learning sounds kind of so yesterday.
Yes, right.
And so maybe it's just a little bit harder edge to it, where it really is about building skills throughout your life. I did some work when I was at Pearson on the economics of kind of transactional approaches to this market versus relational approaches to this market. And without getting into any of the details and not proving that they're the same, I have a hypothesis that there's a tenfold increase in value creation for that take a relational view of the learner. And I think I see us as enabling that as well. So things like, if your community college or a network of community colleges that you might be a part of, for example, decides to really support the type of learner that you are and the type of person you are in the type of region or the type of industry you care about, then, being part of that network for, extended period of time, coming back and getting reskilled, not just getting your first credential. When you feel like you should get recognized for things that there's a place you can go on the weekend and go through a gauntlet and prove, hey, I don't need to spend 9 months doing something. I've been spending all this time doing it, and I've done some stuff even on my own. So let me just show you what I can do. Can anybody give me credit for that? Can anyone recognize it? So, and I think community colleges, for example, would there's an opportunity for them to be that service provider of all these various things, as kind of the last mile to the employer, the last mile to the community and people in the community. And because there are 1,000 of them sprinkled around the United States and they're funded, there's an opportunity to dramatically improve the efficiency and the velocity of innovation in this space. And I think the last point is that's going to be, supported by standards and collective understanding of how we're solving this problem. And part of that is going to end up triggering funding. And, the funding equation at the end of the day in the US is probably the biggest challenge for education and innovation in general and innovation in this space in particular. It's a lot of good ideas, but everyone has to stop thinking about what's the good idea and figure out the pay for.
Right. How do we make it work? Right.
How do we make that work? And, so that it can be sustainable. So I think those things are going to, in 5 years from now, I'm hoping that we are in a very different place along each of those dimensions.
That's fantastic, and I love, how you painted that and lifelong skilling. So that's a wonderful concept, and really, in terms of skills visibility and giving learners a voice, that helps bring it all together. Well, thank you so much, Bill, not only for your time during this hour, but for the work that you're doing and all the other labbies. And I've been a huge fan of Education Design Lab for quite a few years now. So. That is fantastic. So thank you, and looking forward to reconnecting. We'll have to do another interview in 5 years and say, no, Bill, you promised us in 5 years, and now you've got even more. So a lot of exciting times ahead. But thank you again for your time. Really appreciate all the insights, Bill.
Thank you, Dan, for creating the platform and for this outstanding work that you and edX are doing.
Thank you so much. All right, thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to this edX podcast episode. Don't forget to follow us in your podcast app so you don't miss a thing. And be sure to visit our website at edX.com to learn more.